Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. In the previous video we finished sanitizing the input from the user, and we added a couple of tests to make sure that no capital letters, for example, they pass to the email, nor special characters to the password. Right, so just wanted to make sure that we had these little checks. I'm not sure whether this will enter the final code. This is the thing with test-driven development. Some parts of the code that we develop, or most of the code that we develop in early stages, is very different from how it's going to look like in a production environment. But we are focusing on making sure that our functionality test passes, and there is nothing wrong with such a test. If just because it's not standard in production doesn't mean that there is something wrong with it. In fact, it's just superfluous, in the sense that if I am already calling the normalize email here and the escape method in the password in the body, these are already expected to be tested by these two methods, right? So this is somewhat superfluous. It doesn't mean it's wrong. And I mentioned at the end of the last video that I was in doubt between encrypting the password or saving the information from the user in the database. And I thought we could save the information from the user in the database first. Although we will save an unencrypted password, this is not a problem, because we will be dealing with a fully in-memory server here, since we are focusing on making the functionalities pass that, so making the functionalities that we define in our tests to pass our code, right? So wait, let me reframe this. So we want to make our tests pass and implement the functionality in our code, right? That's better, and we don't want to go too much beyond. So do we actually need to create an actual connection to an actual database to make our tests pass? No, we don't have to. So for our purposes here, we'll be using MongoDB, and I think it's a fairly easy database to start working with because of its it's document-oriented structure, which makes it very straightforward for those who are already a bit familiar with some working with a bit of classes or some object orientation, and this makes it much faster to learn than if we had to learn, for example, the entire SQL language to work with Postgres or with MySQL. So I think MongoDB will serve our purposes of the authentication microservice, and we are still free in later microservices if we see that there is heavily relational data that we want to store in a relational database, then we can consider an option that is out there that is open source. For us, the MongoDB and Mongoose will suffice, and for this video and for the next few videos we will not even implement an actual running MongoDB instance in our computer. We will use the in-memory server that we will install in a bit. So I'll just move the save user information to the database to our in-progress task, and we can already start writing our tests, right? So this would still be in the signup route, I believe. I think that I'm thinking whether it would make sense to structure this a little bit better, but we can come back to this in the future. So right now I will not spend that much time in the exact design and structure of the files, whether everything will be in the signup file or whether we will break this down into other files. For the moment, we will put everything in signup. If we decide to split it up, it's simply a matter of copying and pasting. So it's not a problem to do this refactoring. So this is going to be tests saving the signed up user to the database, right? And here we have, I just want to come back here to highlight that we have this task send verification email to the provided user email, and this task will require us to work a little bit more on our data model. So to have a data model that goes beyond the user and password basic data model that we normally begin with, we would also have some sort of key to verify that the user or to verify the email of the user, or if not a key, a Boolean flag that is going to store is verified or is not verified, right? So if I send a key to the user, maybe that key would contain some information about maybe the user ID or the user email, and this would allow us to identify the user in the database and then update the user or the flag with a is verified information once the user visits the link that we will send to the user via email. I just want you to keep that in mind because there will be a few changes to our model, right, to our user schema over the next few videos. But for the current purposes, if I want to test that saving the signed up user to the database, the only thing I need to test is that I can use, so how can I express this? So I will send some information here, right? So let me just, before I write my test, I will just write some comments. So send user information, and here I can directly go to sending valid user information because all the invalid user information cases are already covered above and they don't really pass any of the 422 codes, right? So we can ensure that our logic is going to start being implemented here. So logic for saving user in the DB will start here, right? So if there are any problems up to this point, we will simply return. And actually here I just noticed that I forgot to put a return. We want to return early here, and we want to make sure that this doesn't go any further in the body of our request or of our route handler. So the idea is I will send the valid user information, then here I want to receive the user information back, right, from the route, and then I want to check whether I can access or I can find the user in the database by using the ID or email property. Okay, and here I also want to prevent duplicates. So I don't want to have two users with the same email. So I will have here, it does not allow saving a user with a duplicate email. That's one important check that we have to do. And the first one, it saves the user successfully as long as the information, or as long as the information is valid, right? As long as the information is valid. And coming back a little bit to the code, this I am just sending a res.send status, right? So I'm not sending any errors yet. I'm not sending any information, any additional information of what happened here. I just want to return a res.send status. So error handling, we will talk about this in more details later on. How can we standardize the error handling? For the moment, it's enough to make our code stop at this point and not go any further. This other concerns, they will come later. Okay, so it does not allow saving a user with a duplicate email. The only thing I want to check is that, so the process is going to be, I will send valid user information, and then I will send valid user information again, same information, right? The same info, and then here something should happen. So should return the respective HTTP error code, right? and this will probably be a 422 again. So let's see here, HTTP return code, and let's see what we can find. So response status, not return code. And I think this could be a bad request, could be forbidden as not a case, conflict is not the case, unprocessable entity maybe, but yeah, I think that 400 would also be okay for us. I mean, it's not a bad request by default, but we could also return with a 422 for the sake of being consistent, so it's also not a problem. Good. So let's start with implementing the tests. Let me save everything and let me start the test watch, and give it a couple of seconds, and it's going to pass everything because I didn't change anything since the previous implementation, and these two tests have no additional code. But now I want to actually have a response, right? And here I'm already sending the email, so if I check for the email here, then I should actually be able to retrieve this information, or at least to show this information on the screen. However, I want to have an additional information here that we at the moment don't have, which is the database, right? So I don't have any database, and I would like to do some setup before I actually can access my database. So I'm going to stop it again. Just wanted to show you that everything is working correctly. And if I come here to mongodb-memory-server, right, there's a package that allows us, so it's a main default package which downloads MongoDB, so MongoDB binary to the node modules. And this allows us, so if I just come to the README file, and this is for testing or mocking during development, right? So this is normally the standard that we would use for that, and it's very easy to work with, so I don't think that there is any problem here. I'll just copy the npm install MongoDB-memory-server, and this I will save dev. But I also have some other packages that I would like to install, and here it's going to take a while, not for me because it's already, I think it's already cached in my machine because I installed this before, but for you it may take a little bit longer in case you haven't installed this before, right? So if you haven't installed this before, then I think it will take a little bit of time for it to install, because it needs to download around 80 megabytes or something. So just be a little bit patient. The other one that we want to install is of course Mongoose. So every time we work with MongoDB, we will inevitably work with Mongoose. It's the default or the most widely known interface to work with MongoDB, and I think it's not a bad one. So I have nothing against it. Some people have, but I don't. So we will use this for our implementation. Okay, and now that I have installed Mongoose, then I can start working on my model. But before I start working on my model, I want to do a little bit of setup for my tests. And this is going to be inside of my source directory. So I'm going to create another directory, and it's going to be test utils. And that's just to make it clear that tests should not come in here, but just utilities for my test, right? So here I want to maybe write some lifecycle method, so lifecycle utils maybe, or just index.ts, or just setup.ts. It doesn't matter. So setup maybe I will even refactor this a little bit. You will see in a bit why. Setup after env .ts, right? And here in this file, the idea is that I want to do a little bit of setup on my machine before I can run any test. So what do I need to do here? I need to create an instance of my MongoDB server, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I need to connect to my MongoDB server via Mongoose. And the third thing that I need to do is, or actually maybe I just write it like this, before everything, and then you already start seeing where this is going. Then we have before each test, I need to clean up the database, and then after all tests I need to close the connection. With the database, just so that it's not hanging there, and we can rest assured that there are no issues after the test. So let's start with the before everything, and for this I need to import the Mongo, memory server, I think, from mongodb-memory-server, and I also need to import Mongoose from Mongoose. Okay, then of course the Mongoose here, I think it's complaining about the types, so could not find the declaration file exactly. So the types @types/mongoose, so we'll just install with savedef @types/mongoose. Give it a bit of time, shouldn't be much. Yeah, everything should be fine now. Should stop complaining soon. Good. Then when I say before everything, right, this is equivalent to a before all in my tests. It's equivalent to a before all, and this is, I will mark it as an async function because we will have some awaits in here. The first thing I need to do is so Mongo memory server is equal to a new Mongo memory server. So I want to create an instance, and of course I need to call this const. And actually I'm thinking it's not gonna go very well, because I will need to access the same Mongo memory server after all tests to close the connection. So let me just remove this, and this I'm going to make a let Mongo memory server of type Mongo memory server, and it's going to be equal to a new Mongo memory server. Then I can, so if you are a little bit familiar with Mongoose, you would have something like this, mongoose.connect, and then you would have the, let's say, http :// localhost 27017 / collection, right? Collection name. So you need a URI to connect to, but as you can see, so this would normally be defined in your maybe some environment variable or something where you would store this if you don't want to make it available to external parties, so to store it securely. But in our case, we are setting up a memory server, so we need to get this URI from this Mongo memory server. So the Mongo URI is going to be from the Mongo memory server .get URI, right? And this gives us this string that we connect to. And this is as you can see here, I just hovered my mouse, this is a promise of a string, so this get URI is actually async. And if you look here, if you hover over it, or if you hold Command or Control and click, then this tells you what is the return type of this function. That's a promise, and the promise is it means that the function is async, so we should await and not proceed until we get the actual URI. And so here I'm going to use the Mongo URI, and these options here, I think that they are used normally to prevent warnings from popping up on the screen, but they are not really, I think they are more or less standard, that we should always set them to true. If you don't set them to true and you get some issues in your screen, that's some warnings and so on, you can just set them to true. It's not a problem. Okay, so the before all is done. Now I have access to my Mongo memory server, and what I want to do is I also want to implement the after all. Right, so the after all, this will always be an async, or this will also be an async, and this I have to look at my Mongo memory server, and I need to close the connection. Sorry, it's not close, I think it's a stop. Exactly, yeah, it's a stop. And I also need to look at my mongoose.connection.close. That's the close one. Now see, I get this squiggly lines here, and that's because they are also async functions, right? So await and await. And then I can rest assured that the connection is going to be closed. And this is relatively important because the mongoose that we import here, as you can see, we are importing a global value for mongoose, and this would be used in other parts of the application. I want to make sure that I have a clean instance of mongoose when I am using when I'm using it in other parts of my application. So that's I think standard, that we'll always close the connection once we are done with our tests. So now there is the before each step, and the before each step will also be an async step. And here I want to clean up the database. So I will get all the collections from my mongoose or from my MongoDB database, all collections, and this is going to be given by the mongoose.connection.db.collections. Right, so this gets all the collections within the database assigned to this connection here, and then I can iterate over all the collections. So for let collection of collections of all collections, I want to issue a command collection.delete many, and here I can simply await, and then this is, so I can rest assured that by passing an empty object as a filter, every single object in all of the collections is going to be deleted. Nice. So now we have a basic setup that we can use to work with our tests, and I think we can start, or not yet, we still need to define a user, right? So let's go back a little bit to the principles of the test-driven development that we discussed in a few videos ago, and let me start the watch, the test :watch. Everything is passing. So let's begin with defining a value here for, so const user info, and this, or yeah, this I'm going to use this, I'm defining it here because I want to use in both tests. So this is going to be an email, so it's going to be a valid email, test@test.com, and it's going to be a valid password, which we already used something valid123. Right, so here I want to get my response, and my response, and this is async, so I need to mark this here as async, and my response is going to come from a request to my app, and I will post in the signup route the user info, and I will expect a 200. Right, this is as expected, shouldn't fail, everything should be working fine because this is a simple request. And then here I would like expect, so I would like my response dot email or dot body dot email to equal user info dot email, right? That's my expectation here. And that's still correct, of course, because I'm returning the email here in the signup route. I'm returning the email at the end of my route handler. Now, one thing that I would like us to do, and oh, actually I forgot something here. So I forgot to initialize this instance of the Mongo memory server. So let me just come here to my package.json file, and in my jest config, where is it? Here. After setup files, after env, and this is why I put, now you see why I put the test utils setup after env file, right? So here I can simply pass the path to my file dot slash src slash test utils slash setup after env dot ts. Oops, dot ts. And why is it complaining? It's because it's JSON, right? So I need to pass a double quote. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, then this is going to be enough for us to start with our application, or at least to have a little bit of setup for us. So let's see if we can run this still successfully. Yes, so now we have executed this file, which means that before all here, now I have my Mongoose instance is connected to my Mongo memory server. So I would be able to use Mongoose within my project, and I would have no problem using the models or schemas and so on. Everything should be working fine. So now I can continue with the development. So here I think that we're running into our first problem, and I would like to get const user is equal to user dot find by ID, and here I'm going to send an email of response dot body dot, oh sorry, not find by ID is not an email, it's an ID of response dot body dot ID, right? Or this you could simply send, I think, just a response dot body dot ID, or a, I think, I'm not sure if this is, of course it cannot find the declaration, but, or even better, to make it more clear, find one email response dot body dot email. I think that this should be correct. Now of course it's gonna break in this user here because I don't have a user. I don't have a user schema, and I'll need to stop everything that I'm doing and I'll need to declare my user schema. So where am I going to declare my user schema? There is normally we would think about declaring it in a specific folder here. That's what I'm going to do, but I want to tell you in advance that this will probably not be the final implementation. And why is it? It's because the user model, I would like to have this user model and this user schema available to all our services that need the user schema. So I would like to have it shared among all the services that need to access this, or that need to get some methods from it, or that need to. So what I want to say is that in the future it may be the case that this would fall into a common package, so a shared package or something, these models, to ensure that I have consistency between the models that I'm using in my microservices. But at the moment, since we have only one, we don't even have a Docker file here. So we are not even thinking about containerizing this yet. We don't even have an application that connects to a database. So at the moment, we will use the folder here just for the sake of simplicity, and this is going to be the user model. Okay, so for the user model, what do I need to do? Of course, everything is going to be failing for quite a while, because what I need to do is I need to define the whole thing around the user, right? So I need to define the I need to define how the user is going, the shape of the user object is going to look like. I need to define the schema, and then I need to create the model and export the model, and then I can use this model to actually test my code. So here, normally we think about interfaces. So I just want to make a comment, like a small parenthesis between interfaces and types in TypeScript. They are normally used interchangeably. Okay, they are normally used interchangeably, and to be honest, I wouldn't say that one is preferable over the other. I have worked with both in the past, and types seem to be a little bit more flexible, but the way I see it, or the way I chose to see it, because it's all a matter of preference, I think it's a little bit of, so it's an open interpretation between these two concepts, is that I will normally use interfaces to define methods that a class must implement. And so, for example, the user interface. So what I will do is I will export an interface, and that is going to be my user model interface, and this will extend my mongoose.document, and here I need to pass something to my document, because otherwise this document is not going to have any, so it's going to be just a general mongoose document, and I can just show you how it looks like. So the document has a couple of attributes. It has also the methods that we are interested in, so the save method, the delete one, the remove. So this document, we want this to be in our user model, but here we need to pass some user shape, right? What is the shape of the user object that this document is going to access? And what do I mean by that is that if I come here to document, then I think there should be, let me have a look here. That's a model, and T extends document. So I just want to, of course, this is not a mongoose.document, because that's the user model, right? So this should extend the basic model of Mongoose, and then when I do that, I was wondering why it was not red here, and the idea is that model, so the model interface, it extends a basic document, and this first term that I pass here, so it's called a generic, this is going to provide the shape of the document that I'm working with. So if it is a user model, then the document that I will be working with is probably a user document, right? So here I still don't have this implemented. I will write this here, and for this I will actually export a type, because the user document, from my perspective, is an object of a certain type, of a certain shape, while the interface, I think that at least when I look at Java, where I have a little bit more knowledge, the interface defines, yes, both attributes that some class should have, but mainly it's used to define the methods and the signatures of those methods. So the interface are normally restricted to defining some functions, And if I use, then if I need to define the shape of an object, I tend to use type. But this is a very, very personal approach. I think that it can also be the case that it's going to fail at some point for us here. I never came across a situation where using this approach led to a problem in TypeScript, so I will continue using it here. And the user is going to have a certain shape, so it's going to have a string as the email, and it's going to have a password, and this will also be a string, and these two are mandatory. Every user must have a string, must have an email and a password. So now, as you can see, this is complaining. It's like, oops, type user document does not satisfy the constraint document. Type user document is missing the following properties from type document: increment, model, blah, 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 and 52 more. And of course, we don't need to worry about implementing all of this, because we already have this in the mongoose.document type, right? Or type, and then I can just make a union, or that wouldn't be a union, right? This here would be an operator that says, okay, take these attributes and these attributes, bring them together. So I think this would be would be in the sense of a union, but it's not really the concept of a disjoint union that you see often like this, for example, in TypeScript with a vertical line. So now you see that once I extend this mongoose.document, then my mongoose.model stops complaining, and that's expected, because now I have all the properties of document and the additional two that I'm interested in. And why did I define the user model? Well, at the moment I don't need anything more in my user model. I just need to tell it that it's a user model that extends mongoose.model and that takes in the user document as the document shape for my model. Then with these two things defined, I need to define a schema, right? And now I finally get to the schema part, and this is going to be done by defining a mongoose.schema, and here I can pass a definition to my mongoose.schema. And the first thing I want to say is the email. The email is of type string, and it is required. And then the password is also of type string, and it is also required. I'm missing a column here. This string is not the same as this string. If you just hover it here, string constructor, this is something from TypeScript, right? This type here, string, it's a NodeJS node basic string type. So this is more specific to, if you are curious, you can just click on there and go around playing with it, see what it means. But for us here, that's just the important aspect. If I pass string here, it's going to complain, right? Because the type, it does not accept this normal string that we use. And of course, actually, string here is not in the context of types or interfaces, so this is not it doesn't have any meaning. It's just an undefined variable, right? So I need to pass the actual node type string here, and I think this should be enough for us to begin defining our user. So now what I want to do is I want to simply export, right? I want to create a model and I want to export this model. So I will create my model here. Is going to be mongoose.model, and this model receives a model here, or actually it receives, I think, a document and the model. So if I just click here, exactly, yeah. So I have T extends document, and U, which is my second generic, extends a model that has to extend the generic T, right? So if I have simply user model mongoose.model, and here I pass, let's say, unknown, just for it to stop complaining, and mongoose.document, of course, And then here I pass my user document and my user model. This is not gonna work, right? This is not gonna work because my user model is not extending my user document, or it's not receiving my user document as its generic. If I pass the user document, wait, I think that there is something missing here. I need to pass the user, and I need to pass the schema, user schema. Yeah, okay. So now it's more clear that it's complaining at the user model level rather than the whole thing, right? So the user model is saying does not satisfy the constrained model, user document, and empty object. So now if I come here to my mongoose.model and I pass the user document, then this stops complaining. And now I can export user here. So let's do it like this. And within my models, I think I have an index where I export everything. Yeah, so here I can just export the default. And within my models folder, I will also create an index file that is going to export my default as user from /user, and it's going to export everything from .user. And why is this? These are for all the named exports, and this is because we may want to access the user document or the user model later on in the future. That's just why I'm exporting it here. So now you see that it's still complaining, but now it has an underscore here, and it's saying add import for user with, what is that, option enter, or all imports with option shift enter. So if I press option enter and I add the import statement from /user, then it's going to actually import my user from my models. So now at least it's compiling, right? At least it's compiling, but it should fail as well. Or actually it doesn't. And that's interesting. Why is it so? Well, let's see what is in for us in this user here. Right, because we didn't save this to the database, so we shouldn't be able to find one. So let's see what it prints in the user. And I think, of course, this I think should be await, right? Because I think this returns a promise. So let me see. It's a little bit complicated, but let's see what happens here. Of course, yeah. So now that's what I wanted to show you. So it has a null result, right? So what I would expect here, okay, so this is working, right? That's the interesting thing of test-driven development. So this is working. Now I come to the next step, and I would expect my user.email to equal the user info.email. And this user here, of course, it's going to start complaining object is possibly null because it's not going to find any, and here I would expect my user.to be defined. And now here, if I want to say, okay, my user should be defined, then I can mark something like this. But I think that this should be, maybe we could change this implementation a little bit in the future if this is not a best practice in terms of testing. For example, I'm the user object maybe possibly null, so let's see if we can get rid of this not to be null, something like this. And no, it's still complains. So I'll try to bring a solution, nice clean solution for this, instead of enforcing that user.email should be defined. Let's see. It's going to fail because I cannot read property email of null, of course. So my user is not here, and I need to find, or I need to somehow save the user to the database. Where do I save the user to the database? I save the user to the database within my signup route. So now I have my information here that I want to extract from my rec.body, and this just to make things a little bit more clear. Here I would like to extract my email and my password from the rec.body. And once I extract the email and the signup from rec.body, then I want to create a new user in my account, right? So how do I do that? Well, it's very straightforward. All I need to do is I need to call the method from my model. So new user, let's call it like this. New user is equal to await user dot, and maybe here I will import it first, user dot new user. No, sorry. This should be const new user is equal, not maybe await new user. Yeah, I think that this would be fine, or this is not. I didn't mark my function as async. Okay, I should do that. Right, so the new user here comes from this, and once I have my model, I think that once I call it, it's asynchronous. So let's see if this works. Yeah, I think let's give it a try without it. I'm not sure. So here I'm going to have the email and the password, and I want to console.log new user. So I always get a little bit confusing which ones are asynchronous, which ones are not asynchronous. Let's see what's going to happen to our test. So it's still failing, right? But I am getting something. So I am consoling.log my user, and now you may be wondering, okay, wait, you have your user, and aren't you saving this to the database? Like, aren't you, once you call new user, don't you save this to the database? Not really. And so I have my instance here, and as you can see, the valid email is actually interesting. This is you can see how it's escaped. So coming back to the topic, once I have my new user, I still didn't save it in the database. So Mongoose doesn't do this for us immediately. I still need to call another method. I need to call the new user.save method, right? And this, yes, this is an asynchronous method. So I will have to await new user.save, and let's see what's going to happen to my test now. And very interesting, my test passed. So this was all the code that I had to use, or that I had to write in order for me to save the user to the database and make sure that it can be retrieved afterwards. So I just removed the console.logs there. They were quite extensive. So now we have an implementation that works on our or that makes our test pass. And I think I'm talking too much about makes our test pass. I think it's a little bit too test oriented. I don't like this approach of mine, so I'll try to decrease dimensions a little bit. So every time I want to save a new user, I actually need to call these two lines. And I find this a little bit cumbersome, that I need to remember that I need to create a new user and that I need to then save the new user and so on. Or what if I want to pass some additional logic to my function to actually, when I'm building the user, maybe I want to send some other logs, or I want to do some additional logic behind the scenes. So we may move this new user here to a static function in the user schema to allow us to actually call this directly without having to instantiate the user, we would call it user.buildUser, for example, or user.create or something. Create, I think it's already a reserved keyword. I think that actually maybe this could even be the case that this implements what we would like. So the create, exactly, yeah. So actually this does it even better. Look, yeah, that's nice. The documentation is nice. So shortcut for saving one or more documents to the database. So here I don't really need to do this whole thing, right? Maybe if you already know Mongoose, you were shouting at me. So I can just do an await user.create, and if I want to access the document afterwards, that's not a problem. It will return this a promise with our document in the end. So if I want to, I could have a new user here, and let's see what happens if I console this new user, just out of curiosity. So it doesn't, here. So it consoles the whole thing, right? So no big problems. I think that this was okay. It's quite nice. Let me see if we can rerun everything. Can I? No. So let me press enter again to trigger a test run. And yeah, exactly. So we are printing the. Are we printing the things? Let me add a new console.log just to make sure that I'm printing. But yeah, so now I'm printing. I just wanted to make sure that this was not this was not coming from the previous prints that we executed. So in any case, here I could actually save the new user, and then as the email I would pass new user.email, and in the body of my response, so the response here, it would be of and actually this was not correct now that I stopped to think about the tests. So I'm here in my tests, and I would not expect a 200, right? That's wrong. I would expect a 201, and I would expect a 201 also for this one, and I would expect a 201 for this one, and I would expect a 201 for this one. So my apologies for that. I think that here I should also expect a 201, and that's this gonna cause a couple of tests to fail, but it's easy to fix. Just see that 201 indicates that a resource was created on the server. So let all the tests fail now. There will be quite a few. So 5 failed, and this can be easily fixed by coming to the signup and here setting a status of 201 and then sending my response. So now all the tests should pass. Exactly. Okay, very nice. I think that this is enough, right? This is what we had to do for our test. Check whether I can find the user in the database by using the _ID or email property. So here I'm using the email property. And the next thing I want to do is maybe to do a little bit of clean up. This response.body.email to equal userinfo.email doesn't matter to us, because now I'm using the response from here and I'm finding the user via the email. So if they are not equal, this would not pass. So the first one, I would expect the user to be defined, and here I want to just write user email, and because my user can be undefined, I want to remove this. I don't like this exclamation dot here. So if there is a user, then this is going to be user.email. Otherwise, this is going to be an empty string. Okay. And then here I can simply pass user email, and this code should pass. So this just makes a little bit cleaner, that I don't need to be forcing any type conversion or anything here in my tests. So it's a very clean test, and it tells us a lot, right? It's a very clean, very neat test, but it tells us that as long as you provide us a valid user info, let me even make this a little bit cleaner, a valid user info, you are going to get a 201 as a response, and your user is going to be saved in the database. So this is already a lengthy process, right? It means that I have a database setup, I have a connection to that database, and the user is being saved, and it can be retrieved from the database, and all of that in a short test like this. Let's quickly do the final test here, because I think the video is already quite long, but I want to finish this now. So this test does not allow saving a user with a duplicate email. So how do I set up the test here? Well, maybe we simply duplicate this first, right? So we simply duplicate this first, and that's I need to mark it as async. And this is going to save the user the first time in the database. Now I want to save the user the second time in the database, but here I would like to have a 422 already, because I don't want to be able to perform such operation. But this is going to fail, and because it's going to send me a 201 because I have no check whether the user already exists. So I need to simply implement that check. So let's come here and let's try to implement this check, and I think it can be implemented here in between, so before creating my new user. So how do I implement it? Well, it's quite straightforward. We actually already have the logic here, so I'll just copy and paste. So my existing user is going to be await user.find1 with the email, because the email is going to be unique. In our case, since we are creating the checks here, we can also enforce this at the schema level, I think, when we define the schema. Let me have a look here. I think I can define this unique, but if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't. There are some problems with that. I need to do a little bit of research, and I'll bring it to you, maybe a cleaner explanation in the beginning of the next video. But to ensure that I prevent any duplicate emails from entering our database, so if I have, and that's quite straightforward, if there is an existing user, then I just return res.sendStatus of 422. And this should be enough for me to make the test pass. Exactly. So very simple implementation, quite straightforward. I destructure the email and the password, and if there is an existing user with this provided email, then I will return a 422. Otherwise, I will continue with the execution. I will create the new user with the email and the password, and then I will send a response with a 201 and the email from the new user. I think this was quite a lot of work that we managed to get done today. We have a in-memory MongoDB server that we can use to test our application, and that allows us to advance development without having to worry about setting up an actual Mongo instance and cleaning that up and doing the whole management part of it, because everything is defined in my test utils and setup after end file, and it ensures that I start with a clean instance of my Mongo memory server, and that in the end I stop it and I close the connection. Let me have a look. I think that we are good for the moment. So of course this is not the final implementation, but for our purposes, which were to save the user information to the database, I can already move this to in review, and I can already move this to done, because my code does what was specified here. If there is anything else that needs to be done, it would be defined as a subtask of my first user story. So for the moment, I will close this task and I will commit this code. I'm going to push it to the repo So now I would just like to run a prettier fix to make sure that everything is fine. And as you can see, there's a lot that changed. So now I can add and I can commit. Probably there may be the case that there is something wrong with ESLint. Let it tell me. Save user, save a new user to the DB plus prevent duplicates. Give it a couple of seconds as always. Oops, that is a lot of errors, right? And that's why we need to, or that's why it's good for us to have such a check. So let's go to models user, and then it simply tells me that if there is an interface that extends this mongoose.model user document and is empty here, then it's equivalent to its super type. So what I could do, for example, is I could take this mongoose.model and pass it here and simply get rid of my user interface. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like it. So I'll turn this rule off. I don't need to always have all the rules on. I like to have this clear for me to use, because this is my application specific. This is not my application specific. This is some more general. So I just want to create an alias. Maybe there is a way of alias empty interface TypeScript or something. No, I think that this type alias, nothing similar. So for the moment, and I think not for the moment, but for the rest of this project, I would like to turn off this rule because I don't like it. And it's this rule, and I'll also turn it off. So now let's see the linting. It should have less errors. 6 problems exactly. Now it stops complaining. So I have the sign up, and the sign up is complaining that expected to return a value at the end of async arrow function. Okay, I need to return this. No, I need to return this. This should stop. MongoDB-memory-server should be listed in the project's dependencies, not dev dependencies, and I think that's because I'm importing it. Yeah, that's really a dev dependency. I'm not gonna use this in production. I don't need this, but I like the rule, so maybe I'll try to find a solution for this. I'll try to find a clean solution without having to turn off the rule. Then let's see, generator runtime. Okay, I have no idea what this is what this is about. Let's see. Okay, 4 problems. We are managing to slowly fix them. So line 19, iterators, generators require generator runtime, which is too heavyweight for this guy to allow them. Okay, that's a so what if I just went with a for each, right? And this will be my collection, and I will mark this as async, and then I will await collection.delete many. That's it. Promised returned from for each argument is okay. Maybe I can await. Nah, it's not nice. Let's see what it's going to tell me. Yeah, but it's giving me some warnings here, and I don't like it, but it stops complaining, right? So yeah, I'm not so sure. Let me try to find promise returned from for each argument is ignored. Let me see what the internet tells me about it. It's the first time I run into this. This should complain. This doesn't help me. So yeah, okay, I think I'll follow the advice here and somehow turn this warning off. Yeah, replace the for each with for off, but then I have a linting I have a linting error, and I would maybe prefer to say I don't know if they actually how can I do that. Alt enter and write, what is this, and disable inspection, right? Yeah, I mean it's fine. Sometimes I think there are also many cases in other projects I had some inspections that were not really helpful here, but before I commit everything and now that I got rid of my linting problems, let me check that the tests work as expected, and they still work as expected. So now I can rest assured that when I commit my code, and I can actually just fetch the message here, give it a couple of seconds, and now it should pass. Exactly, and I can then push the code to the repo. Good. I think that this was it for today. Yeah, we're already at more than 1 hour, but it was very fun, and I think we achieved a lot of things. There is one file missing here. The yeslint was not added. I think it was my fault. I forgot to run a git add, or it got formatted after the commit. I'll just commit this as a simple core message, and this is add or commit missing file. Right, I could maybe amend the previous command, but or I could amend the previous commit, but let's keep things a little bit cleaner. Great. Thank you for sticking to the end. I hope I managed to offer you a more complete setup how we can still here add some tests for our signup route. What I noticed is that I didn't add any test for my user model, and that's because this doesn't implement any functionality. This is basically a helper. Oh, I have a comment here that I don't like, but let me just remove it. So this is a somewhat a helper file to define the user schema, which is, or the user model, which is then tested via the signup functionality. I'll consider creating a test for the user here. I'll do a little bit of research and see if it's a good practice or not. So far I haven't seen testing directly the user model. It was always tested via the functionality over the functions where the user model is used, but if there is anything, then I'll bring it to you. Thank you again, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.